for yours and Prasanna's sake. I'm actually doing, as part of CNECT, I'm doing a professional services engagement at Barclays. I was brought in here by Neil Hyman, I guess, who has a relationship with the Shore Group from prior employment at other places. I'm project managing, PMing, and doing some high-level PMO functions in the on the project that your team is engaged with. So I'm working with Ian, Ed, Will Hickson, Will Shackleton, and Nadav, and a few others on the team as part of the overall data project we're doing here. As I saw what level of work the Shore Group was doing, I thought it would make sense for us to have a conversation with Ian and Ed to talk about CNECT and what we do, and see if there was any potential fit for us to work with the Shore Group. The company's been growing organically for the better part of the last 4 years. We've been garnishing most of our revenue through professional services engagements while we continue to build a product based on our experiences with using it at client sites. So the place where we fit into really is in the data quality, data management space. Hold on one second, guys. I'm sorry, Bill. If you want to take it from there,
Sure.
I'm getting interrupted.
Yep. Yeah. So our goal has been basically to try to address a certain gap in the marketplace. And let me just give you my background. I've been servicing financial services for a long time, working in the technology division, supporting the CFO's office, COO, risk officers, and so forth. And one of the things that I've done is I've implemented a lot of vendor systems, a lot of custom solutions, but invariably we've always had to download data, provide data into Excel or Access, and give users the ability to look at their own data and work with data outside these enterprise solutions. And one day a controller came up to me and just said, point blank, he said, when are you going to do something that's going to address the problem of us having to constantly take snapshots of data and do all this manual processing, highly error prone, highly tedious, key man risk, all sorts of different control point concerns. And basically, in looking at the marketplace, there wasn't a really good solution. Hence, we decided, let's see if we can address that space and see if we can introduce a product that might be able to address the common needs of all those business people that are looking to connect to information really quickly, be able to look at information, find out what's valuable, what's not valuable, what do they want to use, what do they want to see, what do they want to be able to manage. And in fact, even give them the ability to address data quality problems, be able to improve data, and be able to dynamically work with real-time data or near real-time data as effectively as possible. So unless there's general questions about sort of that introduction, rather than taking you through a slideshow, I'd rather just jump right into the product and show you the various different types of things that we've already been doing with the product. So any questions before I get going?
Yeah, hey Bill, I'm back on. Yeah, I just wanted to close out. I guess Bill did a great job in finishing that up my intro. But basically, we had met with Ian and Ed. We went through the product and explained what we're going to show you today. And their feeling was that there was some potential here, and that's obviously why we're here together today to walk through this and then get your feedback as you guys are on the ground and you work with your clients a little bit more closely and see what the potential for a fit is. But I'll let Bill take it away and show you guys what we do.
Great.
Okay, so right now you should be looking at the CNECT application. The way the application basically works is on the left-hand side we have an Explorer panel. We consider this to be a portal because what you can do is you can actually make a data connection to various different sources of information across the enterprise. So in this particular example, I have very disparate data. I have information about air travel. I have a CFO portal application which gives a CFO with very detailed and high-level information about their financials. We have a concessions portal, which is involved in dealing with food services. We have a detailed subledger revenue model that's dealing with business operations and transactional detail. We have an operations application, which is looking at reconciliations and operational data, being able to verify whether information is accurate, correct, and complete. We actually have a reconciliation module where people are doing things like looking at two completely different systems and wanting to reconcile basic information between those systems. And then we have a social media application, which is basically going out and looking at various information in social media. Again, the concept is that it doesn't really matter what's behind the scenes. It could be a SQL Server database, an Oracle database, a MySQL database. The idea is you want to be able to give the users a single point of entry where they can access the information that's relevant to them. So just as an example, I'm gonna start with the CFO portal. In this example, people generally want to be able to do two things. They want to be able to look at a transactional view of data, similar to a data dump in Excel, but they also want to do a top-down analytical type capability, such as pivoting capabilities or charting capabilities. So in order to try to avoid the whole download scenario, what we did is we provided them with two different views of data. So if I just drill down, and this is all configurable, this is the way that the CFO organization wanted to see their data. They wanted to be able to look at either daily transactional detail or monthly analytics. So let's just take a quick look at a daily transaction view. So I'm going to just pick our corporate ledger transactions. This is going to make a link to an underlying Microsoft Dynamics general ledger system. And it's going to pull back the data directly out of that vendor system. So the first thing it does is it presents me with a filter area so that instead of going after the millions and millions of data that's in the general ledger, I can actually filter that data down in an intelligent way. So I click on the little plus and it gives me an option to be able to then filter on any of the different attributes that's in that data set. In this particular case, I might be interested in looking at a specific transaction date. Or potentially, I could even look at information greater than a certain point in time or between two different dates. In this particular case, I'm just going to stick with a particular date. So let's just pick data from 2014. And at this point in time, I could make a more comprehensive filter. I could add more conditions or just remove them out. This is good enough for now. Just hit run. It makes that connection to the vendor system, and it pops out your data in what looks like an Excel type of grid structure. Now, the key is that we want to be able to make this as enabling as possible and to take advantage of some of the different types of functionality that people would typically do in Excel. So things that you can do very, very quickly with a push of a button, you can click on a column and it'll sort that column. You can click on it again, it'll sort it descending. You can actually move it around and move columns to different places. You can resize columns, all the typical things that you'd expect to do. You can even take information and say, not interested in vessel ID. You can actually click on this and you can actually remove the column right out of the report. So you're customizing and building this view the way you want to see it. And this is a very personal experience. It doesn't impact the way anybody else would view this data. And if you determine, actually, I want to pull that data back, you can always go back to your column chooser. There it is. I can just bring it right back into the report. Other key things that we can do with the data is many times we want to organize our data and be able to see it by specific information. In this particular case, if I scroll a little bit to the right, I actually have a location or a port. And I might want to just take that and organize my data by port. So if I just drag it up into this little group by area, I can now just drop it, and you'll see the data is now organized by each of the different locations. So you can quickly drill down into any particular location and see all the activity relevant to that location. All right. The other thing that you could do is you could actually go further into details and subcategorize it or subgroup it. So I'll take the vessel and drop that in as well. And now I can look at a location, and I can look at the activity for a specific vessel. Again, gives us a very quick way to be able to look at the data and see, is this data valid, relevant, useful, what's important, what's not important, how much detail. But let's say we want even a higher level, a quicker view of how much activity is out there. We can actually provide a little bit of summarization of each of these groupings simply by saying things like, we'd like to see a count, and perhaps we want to do a sum of the amount so we can see how much activity is going through a particular vessel or port. So if we click on OK, you can see the actual count, and if I drill down, you can actually see the activity for each of the different vessels. And again, all of this is just generally available, that if you make a connection to a data source, all of these functions I'm showing are just available as part of that grid type environment. All right. So now let's say we want to just clear out that grouping. One of the other things that we might want to do with this data is we might want to search for specific data within the entire grid. So we're just going to open up our Find panel, and you can actually go into here and you can look for certain data. So potentially I just want to look for, maybe I want to look for Andrew, and hit Find, and it will immediately find all the different instances where it finds Andrew. But you could also put in, any particular string like ANU, and it'll find any place that exists. In this particular case, it's in the middle of the month name. So it's going to find that string any place it happens to be. So it's a very quick way to look for information and figure out in what field or what column is a particular set of data, so that I know what is important, what's not important. It's very, very useful if you're looking for specific IDs, or if you're looking for specific values and you're not quite sure where in the data set that might appear. So again, this is just a real quick high-level overview of the types of things that we can do in terms of manipulating the data and sort of organizing the data. Any questions so far?
Yeah, I have one. I'm not sure if you're going to get to
I
this.
have one question, Bill.
So go ahead, Prasanna. I'll ask after.
Yeah. Okay. So my question here is, how is this different from an Excel? You can do in Excel the same thing, right? You can have if you go to the data part in the Excel, you can link to your database table and pretty much do everything you're showing here, right? So what's the unique differentiation between Excel and this one?
Yeah, so Excel has, first off, Excel is going to have a limitation in terms of the number of rows that you can deal with. Second of all, not many people really necessarily understand or know how to set up certain of those capabilities in Excel. The third thing is, once you download the data in Excel, people can manipulate the data and change it, whereas here, no matter what I do, I can't change that data. So it's basically a view-only snapshot that controls what I'm allowed to see. There's a number of things that basically allows us to have immediate action to be able to filter any type of particular information against the database, whereas typically with Excel, if you did do their data integration, you have to do a lot of setup, you have to do a lot of different things to make sure you've enabled all of that type of capability. But to also answer, I'm not saying that we're replacing what you can do with Excel. What I'm saying is that we might be able to provide what Excel provides in a more controlled, more scalable type environment. And there's a lot of other things that we can do that I haven't gotten to yet, which would go beyond what you can do in Excel, and certainly is simpler and faster than what you can do in Excel.
Yeah, just to add to that point, one of the things that what I see as happening is that, I would look at Excel as sort of like as a development or a sandbox that people will try to build their models or their process or vet their ideas in, because again, it's quick, it's easy, you can share it with a bunch of people real fast, get things done. But then when it comes to creating that repeatable process for the second round, or putting something that's Excel-based into production, then our system would be a perfect fit for that, because instead of emailing or putting on a shared drive somewhere or SharePoint set or what have you, some level of an Excel spreadsheet that people are now sharing, this would actually link directly into the data sources and pull the data live versus people downloading and emailing. So that's sort of like the additional sort of thinking around, how does this work to complement Excel, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Uh, in a sense, yeah, means like what I have done earlier was I had similar requirement. So what I did is I linked data to Excel and gave that Excel file to anybody who wants to use it. All they need to do is once you open the Excel, it automatically refreshes the data, or there would be a refresh button in the Excel itself. If you
Right.
hit
So,
that, it will do that. So
right. But so where's the security in that? Where, are you controlling users and roles and what they're allowed to do with that access?
actually, there is Excel means again, I think we are deviating, but Excel is an option where when you open up, it pops up a small window by default. You can use authentication or you can in that case, I did a small macro where user enters their username and password, and then I go to the database, pull it. So
Right.
those
So
things are
so now
doable.
we're
Yeah.
so now basically, yes, you're right. You can do all that. You could also do that with business objects or Crystal or a lot of these
Yeah.
other products too. But it involves someone writing a macro or getting involved in a more technical way. Hopefully, we can show you that you can do this without having to actually develop or build any of that type of additional automation. But I mean, we've only just kind of scratched the surface. If you don't mind, let us just kind of keep going through
Sure.
some of the use cases of things that we can do, and then we'll talk about where the differentials are between whether Excel or it's Tableau or any of these other tools. We can talk about that.
Okay, sure.
There was another question.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we're going to get to this later, but if we're going to be looking at use cases, one of the things that we're often working on or doing when we're using Excel is we're working off multiple spreadsheets and utilizing lookup functions to relate spreadsheets to one another and doing analysis based on values from multiple spreadsheets that get consolidated onto one. So is that type of feature and functionality going to be available to us, or is this all sort of like one table, one sort of
No,
spreadsheet view at a
I'll,
time? Yeah.
I
Okay.
will get to that towards the very end, but you can
Okay.
basically construct your own dynamic data set by
Great.
combining data from any set of tables. You don't have to look at only one table at a time. In this
Okay.
particular case, we're actually accessing a database view, which happens to go across multiple tables. So in this particular example, there's a view that previously existed. We could have accessed a stored procedure or a table as well, but I'm going to show you something towards the end where I can show you how we actually go about connecting to multiple tables and constructing a dynamic collection, which again represents attributes from multiple tables.
Okay. Fantastic. Thank you.
Okay. So just quickly, there's other things. I'm not going to go through all the details, but if you want, we could apply conditional formatting to this. So you can always open up our little style. You can create a rule, and rules are important. So I'm going to show you one rule because we use this in many different ways. But you can always create a rule, such as maybe you want to say anytime my amount is greater than 3,500, I want to set the background color equal to green. All right, and basically by doing that, when you look at the data, you can see there are a bunch of them. You can see it just quickly highlights those rows. So one of the things that we've done is some people want to see data exceptions, and they want to be able to quickly highlight those things that they want to look at. And rather than producing a data quality report, we might just do some simple conditional formatting, make it available to people. You can create as many rules as you want to be able to organize and set the display to be the way that you want to set it. Um, Other things that you can do similar, if we wanted to actually add an additional column to this view, we can click and create a calculated field. Again, it looks sort of the same way. We create a brand new field. Maybe we're going to call this adjusted amount. It's going to be a decimal, and we build the same type of expression. So I can pick one of my fields, say amount, and let's just say we multiply that by 1 point whatever. Hit OK. And then what it does is it will actually insert that as an additional field on the end. We can then take that adjusted amount, we can move it around, but it allows you to dynamically calculate a new field based on whatever algorithm you choose to create in that expression builder to be able to manage your data the way you want to see it. So even though, and again, you do the same thing in Excel. You know, you download all the data, and then you can actually create whatever additional calculations you want to. In our case, once we've created the additional field, if we actually want to run a different date, we could run a different date. Go ahead and let's say we just pick a different date, 15th. We hit run. And when it runs that data, it keeps that calculated field and it keeps all the conditional formatting so that you can continue to work off your data set, again, no matter what set of data we're looking at. The last thing that I just wanted to mention, we also have the ability to do some transformation of data. So let's say that we wanted to actually apply a more comprehensive business rule to data, not just do a simple column calculation, but we wanted to create a rule that would dynamically run against this data set. Maybe you want to, you have a certain value that's always wrong, it's a referential value, and you want to always just replace value A with value B. You could actually create a rule. In this particular case, it'd be a substitution rule, which would allow you to basically replace, let's say if we picked a column, it was address, you could replace one value with another value. So we could say address is the new address, whatever that happens to be, P.O. Box, blah, blah, blah. And then your filter is whatever the current address would be. So our filter would be field address equals, XYZ. Right. Hit OK. And what this again allows us to do, we can actually, I have to pick a date range for which I want to run this for, where I want the business rule to be applicable. Hit OK. We now have a business rule that we've quickly created. And if I choose to, I can just select the rule. I can run the rule, and it will actually apply any of those changes to that data set. I don't actually have a address of XYZ, but again, I'm just trying to show you the general type of functionality where we can update and manipulate our data so that, again, you can basically transform or modify the data according to a business rule. And then if you really want to, we can turn on the auto flag. And the auto flag basically says, hey, if we want to automatically run this transformation every single time we run this extract or we run this report, it will automatically run that particular transformation to the data and present you with the final results. It would take me probably about 10 minutes to go through a real proper example of the data transform. I didn't really want to go through all the details. I'm happy to go through it in more detail if this is a function that is of value. But I just wanted to give you sort of a high-level view of the types of things that we can do either with conditional formatting, adding additional columns, or applying a different type of business rule through a transformation. Any questions on that before I move on? Okay, so I'm just going to shut these down. Now, this is just looking at, again, it looks like an Excel grid. What if we want to look at this more in an analytical way? Within Excel, you would typically download all the data, and then you'd either pivot it, or you'd insert a chart, or you do whatever you want to do. Within our environment, what we do is we actually we organize it as a separate report. But basically, we're going to run the exact same set of data, but now we're going to look at it in a top-down view. And in addition, I'm going to run it for a much larger set of data. I'm going to run it for a year's worth of data. So it's currently pulling all that data out of the vendor system, and it's going to immediately pivot the data and allow us to then slice and dice that data against any different combination of columns or attributes that we have. So in this particular case, you can see these are all of the different attributes that are available. And in our pivot space, we can basically choose what we want to do. So if we wanted to create a quick little view of activity over time, we could take our location, our port, drag that down, and then just bring our month information, drag that down, and you have a quick little trend report over time. You can also do things like you could decide, you know what, I don't want to see everything. I want to filter this data even further. But rather than going back to the underlying data source, we're going to filter it immediately right here and quickly just say, let's just look at expenses. So now we're looking at just an expense view of the data. Right? We can, again, make this more and more complicated. If we wanted to, we could bring in the quarter, pop this into the quarter. We could bring down a lot of levels of detail of the transactional information, and see some pretty complex different results of the data. You can then summarize or roll things up. We can actually collapse the entire group and then drill down into the details you want to drill down into. So it gives you the ability to basically construct whatever type of report structure that makes sense for you. And the one thing that we know that happens is a lot of people will do their analysis, they'll see what they want to do, and then they'll say, okay, I'm done with that, I got my answer, now let's just reset and go back to the beginning and let's do our next analysis. So again, you might pull in a different set of data and do your calculations on that set of information.
Right. So, I mean, you guys can see that, I mean, with the in the upper right-hand side of just above this pivot, there's the row count, or the rows that have been cached into this interface, is about close to is 45,000 rows, right? We've tested this up well over 1 million rows worth of data, and provided you have a fast enough desktop, you see very little performance degradation when you do this kind of manipulation and movement of data, since it's all locally cached. And then, when it comes back to the write back feature, depending on how the security model is set up, and we write back, nothing is actually stored back to the quote unquote golden source until you actually save that back to the data, to the database.
And I'm going to show that in just a couple of minutes. So some of the other things that you might want to do within this is, if you want to add a quick little chart to it, we can just go up to our view, put our chart in, just expand that panel a little bit, and you quickly get charting. And as you change the data, as you highlight different sets of data, obviously it'll update your charts on the fly. You can do bar charts, stack charts, line charts. You can do pie charts. So it gives you the option to basically look at the data any which way that you want to that makes sense, until you say, okay, I'm looking at the data, this makes sense, this tells the story I'm trying to tell, and you don't have to worry again about manipulating different extracts and doing multiple different chart insertions. Everything is just sort of dynamic and works with the data on the fly.
And just to add to that point as well, our focus really is not going to be building out any type of extensive visualization. That space has become very, very crowded with a couple of market leaders that are out there already. But in some of the conversations we've had with some hardcore users of systems like Tableau, for example, we've discovered one common complaint across all of these users is that their data quality is probably their #1 pain point and problem when trying to actually do their day jobs to do business intelligence or analytics, in getting from various departments across their firms data in spreadsheets, flat files, comma delimited files, what have you, database tables. They are spending a lot of their time homogenizing this data so that they can do their day jobs in the analytics space. So that's really where we're focused on trying to solve what problem we're trying to solve.
I'm going to spend one more moment on this, and then I'm going to show some of that data write back capability. Again, typically when we're looking for data exceptions, or when you're looking at data, many people are going to want to look at a month over month or quarter over quarter type of analysis. So we have a summary variation where you can just click on the summary variation, and it gives us the ability to basically look at our data and say, you know what, I want to see a percentage variation. So this is simply, what is the percentage of each column of data? How much data, or what 398,000 is 3% of the column. Or you could do percent of the row, percent of the grand total. Gives you a lot of the standard type of capabilities of looking at it. You could also rank and see where things are ranked. So you have an understanding of where your biggest points are, where's your smallest points. Or you can actually do the variation itself, and you get an actual detailed variation of what is the month over month difference. So since we don't have a previous month to one, so your first variance is blank, so I can hide that. But then every single month after that, you can see the variance. Or if you prefer, you can see what it is on percentage basis. And you can see what the percentage change is over time. And if you really want to, you can actually pull the amount out of your report entirely and just look at percent change over time. And again, it gives you the ability to very quickly get a high level or drill down into a detailed level view of how your data is changing over time without having to write any types of formulas or calculations or any type of complex manual, etc. type of processing. So let's get back to a couple different things. If I want to clear out my variation for a second, let's pull our amount back in. The one other thing I wanted to mention is if you ever do, just like a pivot table in Excel, you can always double click on a row and you can see all the underlying details below that row. So you always get the detail of how we're rolling up that information. Now, what if we do find exceptions or we do find problems and we need to be able to address them? There's a couple of different things we've been asked to do. In this one subledger view, this one financial model, they actually wanted to create their own adjustments and be able to save adjustments. So what we did was we gave them an environment where they can actually go in, they can basically go into what looks like a grid view, and they can actually edit and maintain adjustments. They can either go to a prior adjustment and change it. So maybe they want to change this from a discount to a reclass. Maybe they want to change the service to MSC. Maybe they want to change their customer to a valid customer. There's a lot of things they could do. Maybe they want to change an amount. They can edit the data directly in their local cache, or they can go to the bottom of the data set and actually enter in an entirely new record with whatever detail that they want to be able to present in that information. So we could actually create new records, or we can edit existing records within the data set any which way that you want to be able to maintain it. So here's a billing record that I was just about to edit, and we can basically create whatever type of detail that we want to create on that record. So the idea is once we've edited a record, you can actually say, okay, I'm happy with this result set. I'd like to actually save this back to the originating data source. You can just go up to File, Save, and what it's going to actually do is it's going to write that record back to the underlying source of the information. So again, you wouldn't necessarily do this on golden source data, key data that you don't want to change, but what if you have referential data? What if you have something like, for example, I have a very simple allocation table where we want to be able to split data for a certain customer and split their revenue 80-20. Well, maybe on any given point in time, you want to change that. And the rule is changing, and now instead of being 80-20, it's now 60-40. Well, you want to be able to very quickly and easily go in and change that data, hit Save. Yes, I do want to make my changes. Right? It's updated 2 records in the underlying data source. So again, if I close this down and open up my allocations again, you can see that it did actually save that back to the underlying database. And we now have the ability to say, well, how has this record changed over time? Because obviously auditability and knowing what has happened in your data is absolutely essential. So if we click on a record and say we want to view the audit trail, you can actually see, let me make this a little bigger. You can actually see just now we modified by me the allocation field. Previous value is 0.8, the new value is 0.6. So I actually have a detailed record of exactly what happened. I can also go back in time and look at any point in time, look at any change of what happened to that data set and see how did it change and how did that get modified. And
yeah, hey guys, Bill, I'm sorry, my hard stop time is up, so I have to jump off. But I guess Nathan and Prasanna, when you guys, I guess, finish up with Bill, just let him know whatever feedback you have, if you think it's a potential fit, what have you, and then I'll circle back with Bill later this morning.
Yep, definitely.
Okay. All right.
Yep.
Thanks, guys. I'll catch you later. Bye-bye.
So again, every different row in our data set has its own audit trail. The audit trail is actually centrally managed by CNECT, which also allows us to look at changes across every table of information in a single place. So you don't have to necessarily look at sort of a view by view or table by table perspective. You could actually say, I want to see every change that's been made in the database through CNECT in one single report, and you'd be able to see all of that detail. So again, where we found this is particularly useful is for those people that are looking to try to update reference data or update some key piece of information, rather than going through a whole ticket process and asking a database to write a SQL or having a DBA do it and then having to test it, schedule it, get people to sign off on it, and then finally schedule it for a production implementation. All we did was we said, look, we're going to grant specific people security rights to be able to edit and maintain their own data. And as long as we've given them the access to update data, they can update it, and their name gets tagged with every single update that they do. So it satisfies the audit and compliance areas because they can see who made the change, they can see when they made the change, and it also gives the folks the proper control to make sure only those people that should be accessing data and updating data can actually do that.
Is there some sort of rollback feature also if we wanted to if we have an audit trail, if we want to just roll back the changes that a particular user made over a specific period of time? Is that available or no?
It's we've actually, you're the second person that's actually asked about that in the past couple of weeks. What we said to them is that we don't have anything out of the box that does that right now, but because of the fact that we have the previous value and the current value, to write a process and add that feature to be able to say, I want to undo the change. By undoing the change, what it probably would do is it would probably just make another change and be a new audit record, because obviously there's a point in time when the previous value was there. So yes, the ultimate answer is no, we don't have the capability out of the box right now. But again, because we know the previous value, if we needed to, we could create an undo function in our ribbon, and you could basically unapply whatever change was just applied.
Got it.
Cool.
This is Will here. Quick question on.
Go ahead.
Yeah, hey, Will here. Quick question. Where does the audit table live? So if you've got this set up on top of, say, SQL Server database, and you've got this audit table, where does that audit table live? And does it, well, I guess the first part is, where does it live? And I guess the second part related to that and some of the other tables is, are you inheriting any of the validations on the database layer? So if you're going in and editing and making changes, where's a field being defined? Like if you're, in your example, if you're looking at allocation, is there a validation in there that says you can't put in text? And if so, is that living on the database layer that's underlying the stuff, or is that actually built into the tool itself?
Yeah, good questions. Let me try to make sure I hit all of them. So there is data that we're reading out of the underlying database schema. Like you can see the key fields are being denoted. Those key fields are identified in the underlying database. So we know what is a key field. We know what's not a key field. Each data type is pulled in from the information schema as well. So we know the allocation is actually a decimal type or a numeric type. So if you tried to put ABC in here, you might be able to actually type ABC in, but it will tell you it's the wrong format. So we do pull in certain types of underlying functionality from the underlying source of what is the data type, what's key, what is mandatory or not nullable. We do pull all of that type of metrics and metadata in. What we haven't done yet is we haven't done something where you'll notice that in a lot of our cases we have drop downs. We could potentially have a drop down if it's a foreign key primary key relationship in the database. We could potentially automatically inherit that referential integrity into our system and automatically build out some of those types of drop down capabilities. But we don't have necessarily have that built in where you automatically get all the primary foreign key referential integrity unless you say, I want to include it. So part of it we pull in, part of it we don't pull in. And I wanted to show you how do we do that. So if you can let me just talk about our administrative layer, our metadata setup. To enable all this functionality, all right, we have our own little application set up. We're actually about to deploy a brand new version of this, but I'm going to show you the existing one we have. You can go in and you can define whatever database object or data access object you want to be able to connect to. All that we really need to do is identify what is the underlying database object you want to connect to? What do you want the business name of that object to be? So in this top level here, you can see I have something called applications and folders. That's right here, applications and folders, but this is the actual database object that's in this case, it's in SQL Server. And I say, this is the view. I want to be able to view it as a grid or as navigator. I could also just say I want to view it as a pivot, which is analyzer. You basically say, what is the data source? So these are all different data source connection strings that we've built. Right? And then you just turn on functionality. So you have, do you want your audit trail to be on or off? Potentially you don't want an audit trail. Potentially you do. I didn't talk about commentary, but you can add comments to records. And so commentary basically allows you to add a comment to a record. The filter is this top filter up here. Maybe you don't want to give them the filter. Maybe you want it just to be, you get the report and that's what you get and you can't tweak it. You can't change the filter. So basically what we do is we set up these few different parameters and then we go to our little action over here and we say create this object. And when you create it, delete it, or update it, it goes out, it reads the database metadata, it pulls in all the information about columns, the different data types, the different attributes of a column, so stores all that within the application, and ultimately, once you've done that, you then will basically be able to see a new view in your Explorer panel, and you can open it up. So creating access to a new database object really is a one-line entry of what we do here. Now remember, earlier you guys said, can you do multiple table objects? And I'm going to get to that. This is a single database object. It's a view, it's a stored procedure, it's a table. But I'm going to show you how it could be something more than that in just a minute if time permits. All right. The other question.
One question here, Bill.
Can I let me just finish?
Can we do stored procedures?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
If I clear out, I didn't show you this earlier. You can always filter objects by just clicking in here. These are all stored procedures. So we're accessing all of these stored procedures. And if a stored procedure has a parameter, we can actually tell it this is the parameter of the stored procedure. So it knows what to ask the user to populate. You could also click on the little filter here and it gives you a listing of all the different possible values. So I can also see, what are all the different objects that are available to be, to look at. So filter it down any way you want to.
Can we give them access to a kind of a web service or something, or it has to be a database object?
Everything that we do goes through a web service. So this is a desktop client application, and we directly access a web service, and the web service is what accesses the database. So if we wanted to access a different web service as a source, there's no reason why we couldn't do that. We consume XML, we consume JSON, so we actually have the ability to take in even non-database objects as long as it's in a standard recognizable format.
Okay. So, but that's easy to configure, right? Or it has to be a separate application to be built or something like that?
Honestly, I'd have to talk to a couple guys on my development team to know what would we have to do to configure a separate web service as a source of information. And I don't know what they would do or how they would do that right now. We haven't done that yet. But all I'm saying is the underlying architecture is that everything that is consumed in this front end is a web service. So as long as we provided the front end with the actual web service link, it could consume whatever web service you provide to us. We've also done the other way around. Our web services provide data to this as a client. Some people have asked us, could we consume data directly from your web service without using the CNECT client? And the answer to that is also yes. As long as you're authenticated to be able to access the web service call, you could consume an XML string back of all this data outside of CNECT. So it's kind of a two-way street. You could do it either way.
Okay.
One of the other questions I think, Will, that you might have asked was, where is the audit log? I didn't really explain that. We do have a list in our metadata. We do have our comments and our audit is all within our data store. So we don't store audit details in the underlying source object or the underlying source database because we might not have permission to do that. We might not have permission to change their structure. If it's a vendor database, we certainly are not going to be able to change the structure of their tables to be able to include audit detail. So we actually maintain that in our metadata repository. We maintain all that information in our own log.
Okay, but in theory too, you could reconstruct that audit table since you're going to have all the keys, all the dates, all the other stuff, and that's just a report within the system.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay.
So again, the other thing I kind of glanced over is we do have a fairly robust security model. So we create users, you create roles, you assign users to roles, and then ultimately in our master security model, you have to basically grant everybody access. So until you are granted access, you can see nothing. So you actually have to say, this is the view I want to grant access for. I am listing where that view is going to appear. So what application is it going to be in? What folder is it going to appear in? What role is being granted the access? And then the existence of this record means they have read access. And then if you want to additionally give them insert, update, or delete access, you can additionally do that. So our security module is pretty robust in terms of making sure that only people or only roles that we want to grant access to have access to the underlying information. So there is a administrative function within our application to make sure that, basically this collection of information is maintained so that data sources are defined, security is defined, and ultimately whatever views you want to make available to people are defined. But there's no scripting, there's no coding. You don't have to write SQL, you don't have to write .NET. Everything is basically just filling in the grids within the system and populating with the information that you want to grant people access to. The one other thing I wanted to show quickly was I want to get to that question of, well, what if it's not a single database object? And if we're just about to deploy a new function that we call configurator. I'm actually going to show you that over here. All right. Our configurator basically is a thin client view of data designed for the business analyst to be able to explore information and determine what information is valid and relevant and what's not. So, for example, in this case, we've created a couple of data source links where someone could say, I want to explore all the data that's in this data source. So if I click on air travel, it gives us a list of all the different database objects that are available in that store. And what you can do is you can actually decide, I want to look at airline codes, explore the data, and it'll actually show you a preview of the data that's in each of these different tables. So as you click through the various tables, you can see what's out there, what information is available. And again, we're not coding any of this. Once we make a database connection, it just reads the information schema and says, hey, here's all the information that's available, and you can see what that basically looks like. And again, it's just a simple little browser-based view mechanism to see what data is available. So now, if you were to say, okay, I like my flight data, but I don't know what this airline is. Oh, doesn't make any sense to me. I want to be able to go to my airlines table, and I want to be able to look up that code and be able to map the appropriate value to that. So now we're saying, well, we really need to do a join, or we need to create a multi-table type collection of information. So the way we would do that is we go to our collections, and we're going to basically create a brand new collection. And in our new collection, what you can do again is you can look at data. So maybe I want to look at my airline codes, or I want to look at my airlines. I can kind of get a sense of what information is available. But what we're going to do now is we want to basically say, okay, what do we want to pull in? And you know what? You basically look through each one of these different values, and you can decide which of these different columns are important to you and which ones you want to pull into the system, right? Once you decide what columns are available that you're interested in, then you go to a next step and you can look at our relationships. And in the relationships, if I hadn't picked any columns, but if you have any columns, you can actually start to say, okay, I want to be able to relate the airline code in table 1 to the airline code in table 2 and say that is my relationship and that's what I want to construct. Unfortunately, I can't show you that functionality. I'm just kind of showing you the premise for how that's going to work. But once we have that relationship in place, then we can finalize our data set. Sorry, I skipped the details. You have to be able to just define what is the name of this collection. Do you want to present it in a navigator view, a pivot view? What way do you want to present it? And once you finalize it, then all of a sudden that new collection becomes available as an object within our client. And then you can actually run that view of the data against, again, as many different tables as you've combined within that configurator application. So the whole idea is explore your data, look at what information is out there. Once you've looked at the information, you see what you like, you can pick and choose which columns you want to include. And once you've included the columns, you can finalize your data and make that as a dynamically constructed data set available in our what we call our workbench application, our client app. So again, I know that's a little high level, but conceptually, that's what we're doing for you to be able to explore data and construct your own dynamic views on the fly. Any questions about that? The concept of, again, creating a multi-table view, or any of the things I just showed you within that configurator module. Okay. So then let's just kind of open it up. Again, we've used the application to give people access to view data in a data store that they don't currently have access to. It takes less than a minute to be able to connect to a data source and create an object for somebody. It's very easy for us to, add new users, to grant people access to the application. There's a desktop install that you just run through, and you can install new people on the system. It's integrated with Active Directory so that you can enable people with Active Directory and single sign-on, or you can actually enable them with Active Directory groups. If you want to maintain some of your security groups in Active Directory, you can pull that and apply that within our security roles within here. Again, you have the ability to present the information, or in certain cases, if you feel it's appropriate, you can provide write back capability and let people write the data back to the underlying source and correct information that you know is a data quality problem. And this is potentially a tool that you're running only against a QA environment, or maybe you're running it against production with different permissions. Maybe it's a development tool for prototyping. So a lot of different ways that you might want to make use of the tool to be able to explore your data, identify data, improve data, and potentially generate a final set of data. So I'm going to take a pause, and if you guys want to ask general questions about the application, if there's something you want to see more in detail, I'm happy to explain it in detail. But I think I want to open it up to everybody for any comments or observations at this point.
I have a quick one. At the start of the call, we said that we have a common client, and that client, is a large financial institution. They have a lot of security regulations in regard to their network and what can be installed in their network. Have you come across any situations where there is an issue with allowing users to install this Connect within like a secure environment like that, or is it, or is there enough safeguards in place where that hasn't been a problem and they've allowed this application to be installed?
Yeah, I mean, we've installed this at Nomura,
Mhm.
which is about as restrictive as you can get. It meets their security restrictions. We are HTTPS based in all of our web service calls, so we're SSL based. We have all the appropriate certificate based authentication. So I haven't come across a client yet who says we fail to meet their security requirements. We take the security part very seriously because, again, our background is dealing with CFOs and SOX compliance and all the regulatory requirements of a financial institution. So we believe that from a security standpoint, we've protected ourselves appropriately. But I'm not going to tell you that we are absolutely sure-handed. No question, we could be implemented in any location anywhere, because inevitably there will be someone that says unless they wrote it, they're not
Right.
going to trust it.
Right. Okay, great.
So from a data exploration standpoint, again, the concept, some of the key things that we tried to address was, we wanted to stop people downloading data into Excel where you can't control and maintain what happens with that data. We wanted to give control in place where if people did update data, it would be very visible through either an audit trail or commentary or otherwise. We want to give people the control but transparency to what is being changed. And again, we also wanted to deal with the performance of being able to go after hundreds of thousands of records as opposed to being limited by what would happen if you were to try to download a massive data set to via a local extract. Um, do you feel that we've shown you how we've addressed those types of problems?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that we hadn't missed the mark in terms of why we think that this is a nice add-on to an organization. Especially, again, we've had organizations that say, we don't know our data, and there's no reporting system in place, or no one's actually linked up to that data warehouse so that we can look at it, and it's just completely non-viable to download the entire data warehouse into some extract and have people go through all of it. Unless you're going to give somebody SQL Server Studio Manager Management Studio, or you're going to give them Toad, or you're going to give them some SQL tool, it's very difficult for people to explore and look at data and potentially prototype solutions. So, again, the potential the potential ways that it could be used as an exploration tool, there's quite a bit. And then again, as a data quality tool, whether you want to use conditional formatting or you want to create business rules to identify potential problems, there's a lot of ways that we can actually go through and present you with data quality reporting and anomalies or exceptions or things that have to be acted on. But again, if you guys feel that we've missed the mark, or you think there are things, key things that we don't do, we'd love to hear your feedback. You have obviously a great reputation working with many, many clients, and you probably have a lot of experience of disparate needs of these organizations. So if you think that there's anything we're fundamentally missing, we'd love to hear your feedback at any point in time. Okay. So unless there's any other questions, we can leave you to think about what you've seen. Certainly, you can provide feedback, amongst yourselves, and let us know what your general thoughts are.
Hey, one more quick question. As far as you define the needs in terms of QA and exploration of data too. I guess my initial impression is that this normally wouldn't be used as a collection tool, but have any users done that sort of thing with this? In terms of, does it scale? Does it allow multiple users in editing functions as though they were entering data in a spreadsheet, but providing the additional audit table, to track changes, things like that?
And basically that comes down to what is the underlying back-end support. So, if you have a Oracle database or a SQL Server database, and you've only allocated 1 gigabyte of RAM to it, and it's running on one CPU, then yeah, you're gonna have all sorts of contention problems. There's nothing that we do on our side that is going to impact the the ability of multi-user environment and multiple people using a set of information. What you could say that we don't do is we don't lock a transaction. So while somebody is in our application looking at this data, if somebody
Hmm.
comes in and says, hey, I want to change a value, and they change the actual value, this is only in their local cache. It
Hmm.
hasn't locked the database. It hasn't done anything on the back end to be able to signify that something has changed so that a different person could edit it. In our world, it basically is, first come, first served. You can do whatever you want in your local cache, but until you go to File, Save, that is something that you're just looking at locally, and it's not locking or preventing other users from accessing the data. So think about it as we do an extract. We read the database, we read the information into memory, we then work with the data in local cache, and only if you decide to hit save do we go back and reattach to the database to do something. So that might be the right way for you to be able to manage data updates. It might be the wrong way. If you wanted to be able to do like a check-in, check-out type of thing, where if I access a set of data, that's essentially equal to checking it out, and I want to lock it and make sure nobody else changes it, we don't do it that way.
Yeah,
Basically,
and
yeah. Go ahead.
yeah, and I don't think that would be as much of a concern either, because I think that there'd be two use cases where one would be data collection, where this replaces something along the lines of a spreadsheet, since it's a flat file, but it maybe is distributed among different users,
Correct.
which may be fine because they may be assigned different things, have different ways of sorting and viewing the data based on assignments. And then we could utilize the audit table to sort of understand what was done. And then the follow-up functionality is, QA, reviewing data that's gone in, creating queries, and then potentially making their own changes, which again are also captured subsequently in audit tables. So I think the real scalability issue just might be if you've got 10, 15, 20, 40 people hitting the same table and making, inserts and updates. I don't think it'd be as big a concern of contention in terms of a row or a single record being changed at the same time. It would just be the updates and inserts happening on the same table
Right.
by multiple users, throughout the day.
Which again, you can put any web-based application or fact client or any tool vendor product. It ultimately ends up just being one of database contention.
Hmm.
We our processing, our updates are, it's just SQL that we're passing back to the databases.
Hmm.
So we're leveraging the database to manage its own contention. We're not trying to queue or sequence different requests. We've had dozens of people all hitting the same database, requesting things, and this one company for a year and a half, they've been banging away on it. From all their financial people are hitting their general ledger, looking at all of that data. They have a couple other people looking at operational KPI metrics and transactional details and operational statistics of the organization. They're all just hitting all of the different various SQL servers all the time, and sometimes you might notice a little slowdown if someone is really hammering that database. But um, in the year and a half we've dealt with that one client, they've never come back to us and said you locked up our database or you blew up our server.
Right,
So,
right.
and
Okay.
again, I'm not going to tell you any application. I've built lots of different applications, and they all have their impact on the underlying back end. But I don't think there's anything that we're doing that is any different than anybody writing a SQL query against a database.
Okay.
And you mentioned the data quality. I mean, this is for one client. They basically want to maintain quality where they said, okay, every day we want to look at our transactional feed. We want to compare the transactional feed to the underlying ref data and kick out any place where there's an exception. So they have their accounts. They wanted to basically say, okay, show me any time I'm missing an account in my hierarchy where I got a transaction, but there is no account. Same thing for their departments or cost centers. Show me any cost center that is on the transactional feed but not in our base referential data. There's several different versions of this that, if they were expecting a transaction to be in one location but it appeared in a different location, they wanted to be able to see that. They basically wanted to see all sorts of different things that would allow them to say, oh, wait a minute, missing account hierarchy. If I run that, if you actually run the data, Do I want to do this? Hold on a second. I think I have to put in a date. So if I have a certain transaction date and I said I want to look at all records greater than or equal to a certain point in time, I actually don't know what time I want to put in here, but let's say I would say 6/1/2013. You could basically run your report, and you could see all the different potential data quality issues related to this particular historical report. I have no idea how long this is actually going to take to run. It takes a long time. All right, it ran and it said, "Oh, good, no errors. I have no errors in that time period. So there's nothing I need to do." But you could run a variety of different reports through here, and if there was a problem, let's say this did result in a missing set of data, then their reference data is right next to it, and they can go into their chart of accounts and say, okay, I need to make a correction to this data, and I got to change the value, or I need to update, piece of information because it's wrong. So this is one way we kind of did data quality to say, here's a business rule or a view of data that is missing, and then here's the underlying table that you need to fix to correct that issue.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay.
Any other thoughts or questions before we wrap up? Okay, well, again, I do appreciate your time. I know we ran a little bit over and got a little bit of a bad start with having to switch between the different meetings, but I hope that you found it interesting. And like I said, we'll follow up with you guys, and see what your thoughts are. And if you have any ideas or commentary for us, we're very very open to hearing any type of feedback you have.
Thank you so much for your time, Bill. This is a great presentation. Yeah, we'll get together internally and we'll gather our thoughts, and so when you solicit the feedback, we'll have something more prepared for you. So
That's great.
Cool. Okay.
All right, thanks everybody. Really appreciate your time. Have a good day.